A very good day to all of you, dear brothers and sisters. It feels good to be back with you once again. I must tell you a fact that I am amazed when I look around at TV snapshots or read in the newspapers about ISIS, the Islamic State suicide bombers, who kill people apparently because they have a philosophy that in doing so they will achieve the seventh heaven and many virgins as their wives. A very strange philosophy. But as I look around, I find that there are many youth who don't seem to have any philosophy. And there is a certain aimlessness about them. Then again, when it comes to Christian adults, I see a hectic scramble for a good job with a good salary, a good home, and a satisfied family. Mind you, I am not against this. It does not imply that you should not look out for a good job with a good salary. But what I want to stress is that often this is an aimless thing which doesn't seem to take them anywhere. Still others in Goa seek pleasures, name, fame, power, money. And it would seem as if they prove what St. Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 32, where he hinted at the hedonistic lifestyle of eat, drink, and make merry, because tomorrow we die. Yes, dear friends, very few have a concern for their soul or have eternity as their goal. It is just the immediate that they are concerned about, not the end times. Personally, I must admit that I myself followed this worldly pattern in my youth and my early adulthood. But things started changing when I got married, and soon after, my wife's fatal illness started showing itself, till she passed away 5 years later at the age of 29, and I was barely in my early 30s. I began asking several questions. Why me, God? Why my wife, Lord? What is life after all? And where are you, Lord, in all the sufferings we face? What is your will for us? Did I do enough for my wife? Was I worthy to be her husband? Many, many questions, including how prepared should I now be for life after death? Friends, I didn't get all the answers, but as I progressed, many things came to light. I must share with you my first real life experience with the term philosophy, which came exactly during my wife's illness. My in-laws and others, they wanted to take my wife to a local ghadi, one who practices witchcraft. Now, Having been in the Catholic Charismatic Renewal for a few years, I knew enough about the dangers to my wife's soul if we resorted to witchcraft. So I put my foot down and told my in-laws, no way will she be going to any ghadi. They were upset, and my father-in-law retorted when he said in Konkani, Tujo bomaicho philosophio dortuka, which simply translated means, keep your Bombay philosophies to yourself, because I had come from Bombay. Then, of course, when she died, I went to my in-laws and I asked, aren't you happy that your daughter can truthfully tell God, I trusted in you and not in witchcraft? And they just hung their head down in shame. Today, I smile wryly and I realize how education and the place where one comes from, one's involvement in one's Catholic faith, have a big role to play in developing a sound philosophy of life. So what then is this philosophy of life all about? Today, I want to share with you my personal understanding of this phrase. I once read, a good heart and a good head make a great combination. A good heart and a good head make a good combination. This is attributed to Nelson Mandela. And it helps us to understand how we may articulate our philosophy of life and to help one live a sound Christian life. So to begin with, let's expound on these terms. First, to articulate. It is to express clearly and easily for people to understand, especially when trying to explain some difficult ideas. What about philosophy? Simply defined, it is love of wisdom. And what about philosophy of life? It is like an aim or guiding principle or a belief or a theory or an attitude vis-a-vis how to live and how to deal with various questions and situations that one is confronted with. Now, if you look at this diagram, it shows a boat with a rudder. So by analogy, having a philosophy of life is having the rudder on the boat, which the sailor manipulates to get the boat to go in a particular direction without the boat going adrift. So then why do we need to have a philosophy of life? In today's world, many are rudderless. They have a boat, but no rudder. And so they are living a confused and blurred philosophy of life, which makes them act or behave in ways that are harmful to themselves and others. We hear this so often. It's my life. It's my choice. Who are you to dictate terms to me. These are slogans one hears all around the so-called westernized world. And guess what? It's creeping into Goa too, because of our touting Goa as a tourist destination. All along the beach belt, there are youth who are living this kind of lifestyle. It's my life, it's my choice. The selfish philosophy of meology, a new phrase which simply means I, me, and myself. I, me, and myself, coupled with the hedonistic philosophy of life. This often encourages our youth to indulge in sinful pleasures, all in the name of freedom. So pleasures dealing with drugs, drink, sex, and what have you. Here's a little quote which I find useful. It says, freedom is the right to do what you ought to do, what you should do, and not what you want to do. I once asked some college students, what is freedom to you? And many of them said, freedom means that I should be allowed to do as I want. It was a sad state of affairs, and I pointed out to them that freedom is not for that. Now, when we were young, at the end of the family rosary, which we all compulsorily prayed, we said the 4 last things, namely death, judgment, heaven or hell. Death, judgment, heaven or hell. It made us aware that after death we would be judged, and on the basis of that judgment we would receive heaven or be sent to hell. Today, these 4 last things are not even known to many Christians. And if they know it, they don't care. It doesn't mean anything to them. That is why, in this world of preoccupation with self, we need to have a sound Christian philosophy of life. To avoid being rudderless and drifting aimlessly in the morass of sin all around us. Now, what are the benefits of having a sound philosophy of life? There are many benefits. Let's remind ourselves of a few. Firstly, you cannot be divided in your philosophy of life. For example, if I am personally opposed to abortion and euthanasia, then I should be 100% opposed and not say, I'm going to favor the general opinion. No, you have to stand by what you believe to be the truth. Let's take a couple of examples further. A young couple, when choosing the readings for their wedding mass, chose Ephesians 5 verses 25 and following as their first reading. Part of it said, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for us, for her. This couple subconsciously made these lines their philosophy of life. to be the best husband or wife to each other, and to make every effort to be faithful and to live out their marriage vows, and never, never resort to abortion. Just imagine what it would be if they had not made this their philosophy of life. Because today we hear of so many couples breaking apart, so many couples resorting to abortion, which is against God's law. Another example, since I am a teacher, if as a teacher I have this philosophy to be the best teacher, but in addition to be a friend, philosopher and guide to my students, obviously then my philosophy will make me make every effort to develop my teaching skills. And not only that, to develop my skills in interpersonal relationships. Otherwise, if I don't have these skills, I cannot be a friend, philosopher, and guide. Yes, indeed, having a sound philosophy of life is a great help in living a meaningful life. Let me show you a flower. Do you find it strange? Yes, it just shows one little petal. So the flower is not complete. Similarly, one needs to have an appropriate philosophy of life for each situation that God has placed you in, or for each role that you play. For example, as a worker, as a child, as a spouse, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a retired person, as a neighbor, as a member of a prayer group. Yes, indeed, if you look at the now complete flower with 8 petals, you will see that each category that you may be in will help you think of a special philosophy of life. So for instance, as a worker, I will think of my philosophy as I will not cheat. I am paid a certain salary, let me work that full amount of time that I am paid for. Mind you, I may sound as if I am preaching, but I myself, when I worked for a bank, I was more often in the canteen than at my table. Today I regret it. The reason, of course, was I was perhaps quick and I finished all my work and I couldn't sit at my table just daydreaming. So I would rather go to the canteen and have a cup of tea. But all my colleagues around me were working and just turning pages, and the boss was quite happy with that. But that is the way life is. So we need to work diligently. As a husband, I hope I did my best for my wife in looking after her during her illness. As a parent, I tried my best to be the best parent my daughter could have. As a grandparent today, I also look upon my grandchildren as I did my daughter. So in that sense, in each role that you play, there are different experiences. And here is a quote by Dr. Hans Selye, which has helped me to be a better person in the different areas of my personal life. It says, people who focus on life's blessings always experience contentment and peace. Whereas those who don't focus on life's blessings generally experience anxiety and tension. It's not to say that I didn't experience anxiety and tension, but much of the time I was contented and happy with my life's situation. So let's look at a mature or a wise Christian's philosophy of life. It is linked with a variety of virtues or attitudes to suit different experiences. Earlier we saw a flower of 8 petals. Now we'll see another flower of 8 petals, and we'll build up each petal one at a time. So let us look at these 8 virtues. Firstly, when facing success, the philosophy of life should be to experience gratitude. Remember, your gifts and talents aren't yours. They are God-given. And therefore, let us be grateful and show gratitude. Here is a quote by John Wooden. Talent is God-given. Be humble. Fame is man-given. Be grateful. Conceit is self-given. Be careful. We all have heard that phrase or that proverb, pride goes before a fall. Hence, let's not be conceited or proud. Let's be careful. Let's look at the second petal now. Failure. In failure, one could have the philosophy of equanimity, or simply a calm state of mind, where you don't blame people or circumstances and don't grumble all the time. Let us learn to think positively and avoid unhealthy comparisons. Let's look at a little demo that I have for you. What do you see here? There are 2 glasses filled to the top. We'll call this glass A and this one glass B. Now imagine glass B feeling bad and saying, I'm not like glass A. I wish I could be like glass A. But how can you be like glass A? How can an ant be an elephant or vice versa? Both are filled to the top. In order to be like glass A, glass B has no capacity for any more water. And that's what happens in our own lives. We compare ourselves with others and feel that we are not so good as them. But God has created us with a certain capacity. So if I am a teacher, I cannot be a technician. Maybe with some training, yes. A technician may not easily be a teacher. Let's look at another demo. Now here, what do you see? A glass not completely filled with water. A pessimist would say the glass is half empty. An optimist would say the glass is half full. Friends, we can be pessimists or optimists in our philosophy of life. There is a quote which says, 2 men looked out from prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. It's the same window, but one sees mud, one sees stars. That's what it is with us. How do we look at life? Let's look at the third petal. In grief or suffering, the philosophy should be surrender to God's will without complaining. A person who complains is never happy. He is not only bitter himself, but makes everyone around him also bitter. So let us learn to surrender. Let's look at the fourth petal. We all make mistakes. The philosophy of life when we make mistakes is to accept our limitations. Accept the fact that we have made mistakes without making excuses or blaming others. Let's look at the fifth petal. It says, hurt. We can hurt others, others can hurt us. In that case, the philosophy of life will be to ask or to offer forgiveness. It has tremendous healing power. A story is told of a man weeping, an old man weeping at a certain funeral of another old man. And when he was asked, "Why are you weeping?" he said, "That man is my brother. And for 50 years we have not spoken. I always wanted to come and ask him for forgiveness, but I didn't have the courage or the time, and now I regret that I didn't do so." So then he was asked, "Why did you stop talking for 50 years? He said, "I don't remember." How sad it is, isn't it? We stop talking, we argue and fight, and 50 years later, we don't even remember what the reason was. So friends, let's look at this that happens in our families. There are disputes, broken relationships, especially over property. At such times, we should seek reconciliation in our sixth petal. Not court cases, because those court cases will drag on, and ultimately no one is happy. Let's look at what Proverbs chapter 15 verse 18 says. The hot-headed man provokes disputes, meaning brings on disputes, while the one slow to anger reconciles differences, tries to patch up. There is a Chinese saying, the man who pursues revenge should dig 2 graves, one for the enemy and one for himself. Yes, dear friends, we never realize it, but when we are angry with people, our blood pressure rises, and that creates a whole lot of complications, heart disease, cholesterol, and things like that. And the enemy will die, but we will also die. So what good is it? It is also said that stones are thrown at fruit-bearing trees. Only a mad person would throw a stone at a tree that has no fruit. Similarly in life, if you and I are bearing fruit, there will be stones of criticism thrown at us. What should we do? we should pray for those who throw those stones and develop ourselves spiritually. It is said that winners never quit and quitters never win. What do we want to be as part of our philosophy? A winner or a quitter? I want to be a winner, definitely. Another quote says, bury the hatchet. As you will see in the picture, a hatchet is like a small sharp axe. Bury the hatchet when you are having fights and arguments so that you don't go and kill someone. Neither should you mark the spot where you have buried the hatchet, because someday you might have to remove that hatchet and fight again. No. Take that hatchet and throw it in the ocean where you will never get it back again. What this simply means is have the philosophy of forgive and as far as possible forget. I know it's not easy, but let's try it. There are two terms I want to bring up just now: a thermometer and a thermostat. What does a thermometer do? It just records the temperature, for instance, the clinical thermometer. Whereas a thermostat, it not only tells you the temperature, but automatically can reduce or raise the temperature. Now, which one is better? Just the thermometer or the thermostat? I would go for the thermostat, because then I can raise the temperature if it's cold or lower the temperature if it is hot. In life, what are we? Are we thermometers or thermostats? Let's look at the seventh petal, lust. As human beings, we are sometimes gripped by lustful thoughts and desires. And I am no exception. The philosophy of life in that case is to resist, to say no for a yes. No to lust, giving in to lust, for a yes to a wholesome life. Not easy. So therefore we need to pray. Pray for self-control in thought and action, and especially for modesty of the eyes. Because what we see goes to our mind and heart, and that is when that whole thing gets triggered off in terms of lust. The first letter of John, chapter 2, verses 15 and 16 says, "The love of the Father is not present in those who love the world. For all that is in the world, namely the desires of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, comes not from the Father, but from the world." Do look it up in your Bibles. 1 John 2, verses 15 and 16. Another quote from Mark 12, verse 30 says, "Let us strive to love and follow the Lord with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our soul, with all our strength." And when you have that total preoccupation with God, lust and lustful desires will just disappear. And very often we will be called to make a complete break from past sin. No playing, hide and seek. I'll give in today and tomorrow I'll be a saint. No. You have to make a complete break. Luke chapter 9 verse 62 says, those who have put their hand to the plough and look back are not worthy of the kingdom of God. So if you're ploughing your field, you cannot afford to look back. You must continue forward. And if you look back, then you are not worthy of the kingdom of God. The eighth petal, pride, egoism. It can puff us up. In that case, the virtue that we should practice is humility. James chapter 4 verse 10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will exalt you. He will raise you up. Be humble. Now, humility does not mean thinking less of yourself. I'll repeat that. Humility does not mean thinking less of yourself, but it means thinking of yourself less. Thinking of yourself less frequently. What will others think of me? What will others say? What will others do? Because I'm thinking of myself much of the time. No. Now, I've shown you 8 petals. There are many other petals one can talk about, just a few more. For instance, 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 10 says, the love of money is the root of all evil. How true. People will do anything for money. And when money is all one can think of, Jesus reminds us in Luke chapter 12 verse 15, take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. In fact, he told the parable of the rich fool who had a bumper harvest, and he was contemplating breaking down his barns, building bigger ones so that he could put in that harvest. And God said, what are you doing? Tonight you will die. Yes, my dear friends, we have to remember that we brought nothing into this world. As 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 7 says, we brought nothing into this world, and we can take nothing out of it, except perhaps the blessings of people whom we have helped, or perhaps our good deeds and works of charity. All these God observes, and He will bless. Many of us suffer from curiosity, and we want to know what's happening in that room, what are they saying, what are they doing. So when itching with curiosity, let us practice MYOB. I heard this very recently. M for mind, Y for your, O for own, and B for business. MYOB, mind your own business. The world will be a better place if we do not try to, find out what others are doing and saying. I've written a word for you here, snoopervise. We've heard the word supervise. A supervisor has to supervise. But many of us are like dogs which snoop, and they were going around snooping everywhere. And a curious person goes around snoopervising. Don't snoopervise. Mind your own business. Another virtue that we can practice to our benefit is that of loyalty. Proverbs 19 verse 22 says, what is desirable in a person is loyalty. Let us look out for loyal friends, but also be loyal friends ourselves. A word of caution. Don't engage in blind loyalty. An example would be blind loyalty to politicians, blind loyalty to political parties. Instead, we should try and see where is our loyalty to be given. Maybe to our parents, to our relatives, and others who reach out to us, and do it in a genuine way. Gandhiji spoke of the three monkeys who hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Good. Especially when we have this tendency to gossip about others. So let our philosophy there be, hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil. However, we must not, and I repeat, we must not shut our eyes, ears, and our mouths when certain sections of society are being oppressed and suppressed. We must speak up, or at least support those who speak up by our prayers and sacrifices for them. As Martin Luther King Jr. has rightly said, he who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as the one who helps to perpetuate it. A great way to put our philosophy of life in action is to find ways and means to practice the spiritual and corporal works of mercy. Maybe at some other time we'll talk about this, but for now I'll just remind us of what these works of mercy are. The corporal works: feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, visit those in prison, visit the sick and those in hospital, and bury the dead. On the other side, works of mercy: admonish sinners, instruct the ignorant, counsel the doubtful, comfort the sorrowful, bear wrongs patiently, forgive injuries, and lastly, pray for the living and the dead. Yes, friends, we may talk about this at some future time, but do practice these corporal and spiritual works of mercy. We will list them out for you on the board. In conclusion, just a few points. Living true to one's philosophy of life is a daily, ongoing struggle. Hence, the need for a spiritual father or a mentor with whom you can share your philosophy of life and your problems. I have had a spiritual father for many, many, many years, and I am blessed. Because mind you, I am as much of a sinner as anyone on the street. But it is when I go to my spiritual father and talk about my temptations, my trials and tribulations, that is when He advises me, and I get the strength to cope up with all these. In addition, regular reception of the sacraments, especially confession, and of course the Eucharist, it's a great help in living out your philosophy of life. Don't procrastinate. I'll do it tomorrow. No. And don't get complacent in case you're sliding downwards or backwards. There's an anecdote of a frog who was put in normal water in a big vessel, and underneath they lit a fire, mild fire, and the frog remained in that water because as the fire continued, the water kept on getting warmer and warmer. But the frog did not notice. It was in that environment, it became complacent, and then it was too late. The water boiled, and the frog boiled with the water. You and I have not to be complacent. We have to get out of our rut and practice our philosophy of life by all means. And the last quotation I'd like to give you from John chapter 10, verse 10, where Jesus says, I came that you may have life. I came that you may have life, life in abundance. This life is yours and mine if we have a sound Christian philosophy of life. I wish you all the very best. In case you have not thought of your philosophy of life, please do so and put it into practice. God bless you.